So, Ms. Regan, I'm going to explain to the jury so they understand what's going on. And Ms. McDougall. We're waiting for them to come in, and I'll just start mid-sentence if they are coming in.
All right. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons having anything to do with the Honorable David Logan, Justice of the Superior Court, now sitting at Salem within and for this county of Essex, draw near. Give your attendance and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This court is now in session. You may be seated.
Dr. Hebben.
And I know it goes without saying, but when the courtroom's closed, there may not be any audio of what's going on during the closure other than by Ms. Canty as the court stenographer and court reporter for this session.
Come right up there. You wish to speak to the witness, Your Honor?
She's all set. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
You remain under oath. Thank you. Ms. Regan, please.
Dr. Hebben, good morning.
Good morning.
You gave to Philip Chism the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms test, correct?
Correct.
And that's called MFAS, correct?
Correct.
Now, on that test, there are approximately 25 questions, correct?
I think there are exactly 25 questions.
There are 25 questions on that test, correct?
Correct.
And the answers that are available to those questions are yes or no, correct?
I believe so. True or false? Oh. Yes, no, true, false. Always, sometimes, no, never.
So that's are the choices.
Yes.
Now, in the Beck Youth Inventory that you administered, there's 100 true and false questions, correct?
There are 100 never, sometimes, often, always questions.
And with the MNPI-A, there are over 400 questions, correct?
Correct.
And the responses are true, false?
Correct.
And with the SEERS, which is the Structured Interview of Reported Symptoms, there are varying answer selections, correct?
Yes.
And one section is no answer, no, sometimes, definitely yes.
Oh, I see what you mean by no answer. Yes.
And one section is no answer, no, yes, unbearable.
One section is no, yes, unbearable, yes.
I don't know if I asked you about the basic to the SRP. That's 176 true and false?
No, that has two sections,
Oh, okay.
some of which are true, false, and some of which have graded responses. If I can find it, I'll tell you what those graded responses are. Never, sometimes, often, always.
Now, I've already asked you this, but you administered the Miller Forensic Assessment Symptom Test to Philip Chism, is that correct?
I did.
And there's a manual for that test?
There is.
And you're acquainted with the manual?
I am.
And the manual has a section that reads, appropriate populations and test limits, correct?
Well, I don't have the manual memorized, but that sounds like a section you would see in the manual.
May I approach?
Sure. And while you're approaching the witness, I'll just ask Ms. McDougall, are you still making the same request as to the court discussing the issue of an order with the doctor? The issue you raised yesterday?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
In an abundance of caution.
Okay. I'll do that before the courtroom is closed.
Thank you.
Do you recognize that as the professional manual?
I recognize it as a portion of the manual.
And in fact, the manual has a section, appropriate populations and test limitations, correct?
It does.
And in that portion of the manual, it says, the MFAS is intended for use with adults age 18 and or older, correct?
18 years or older, yes, it says that.
It also says, the MFAS has not been validated for children or adolescents under the age of 18 years, correct?
It does, yes.
And continuing on, it says, although the validity of the MFAS has not been established with these groups, researchers have found that malingering instruments such as the Sears are capable of identifying malingering in adults. Because of its similarity to the Sears, it's very possible that the MFAS is a valid indicator of malingering in adolescents. Although clinicians and researchers may use the MFAS with children or adolescents on an experimental basis, further research is required to establish the validity of MFAS results before clinical decisions based on this instrument can be made with such populations, correct?
Well, actually, you read a portion of it incorrectly.
Why don't you read the portion that I read incorrectly?
You said researchers have found that malingering instruments such as the Sears are capable of identifying malingering in adults, and it actually reads adolescents.
Oh, I apologize. So let's read that sentence over again. Although the validity of the MFAS has not been established with these groups, researchers have found that malingering instruments such as the Sears are capable of identifying malingering in adolescents, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, at this time, my questions will be about the content of a test.
All right. At this point in time, the court is going to close the courtroom only for the questions. And before anybody leaves, there's anything I can say that doesn't require the courtroom to be closed, won't be closed for. Ms. Regan, to the extent that you're going to ask a question in this series, as awkward as it is, that doesn't reference back. I'm going to have to do the back and forth of having people come back in. And Dr. Hebben, I recognize the proprietary and ethical issues that were proffered by the to the court, and so I'm ordering you to answer these questions. Okay, you're ready now, Ms. Regan?
Yes.
Okay, the courtroom will be temporarily closed for just these questions.
Increased ringing in their ears when under stress?
I have no opinion about that.
Do you have a copy of your report?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you questions about the MMPIA test that you gave to Philip. I direct your attention to page 14. I'm going to read the paragraph, or parts, a few sentences, and you tell me if I'm reading it correctly. Beginning with the second paragraph. The results from Philip's validity scale from the MMPIA were also consistent with feigning of mental disorders, correct?
Correct.
Although his F index was less than 85T, i.e. 83T, his FK index was highly elevated at 23, correct?
It's F minus K index.
Overall, according to the interpretive report from the MMPIA, Philip's response to the MMPIA items were more extreme and exaggerated than those in most adolescents. Did I read that right?
Than those of most adolescents.
He endorsed a wide variety of extreme symptoms, correct?
Correct.
These symptoms may include psychotic thoughts or behaviors, alcohol or other drug-related problems, eating difficulties, extreme family discord, or problematic interpersonal relationships. Correct?
Correct.
He may be exaggerating his symptoms as a plea for help. Correct?
Correct.
Directing your attention to the top of page 15.
Just want to remind members of the audience that the only people who can be on their cell phones are credentialed members of the media or those registered under SJC Rule 119.
All right, directing your attention to page 15, top paragraph. With the caution of an exaggerated report of pathology in mind, Philip's endorsements on the MMI/A resulted in the following interpretation. In terms of symptomatic behavior, acutely disturbed behavior tends to characterize adolescents with this clinical profile. Did I read that correct?
You left out the P in MMPIA, but otherwise, yes.
Okay. This person is likely to be experiencing difficulty as a result of his poor impulse control, correct?
You read that correctly, yes.
Because he tends to act out unpredictably in sometimes bizarre or destructive ways, he is probably having problems at this time, correct?
Correct.
He may have unrealistic or grandiose plans, and he may be delusional. Correct?
You read that correctly.
Now, directing your attention to the paragraph at the end of page 15. An examination of Philip's underlying personality factors with the MMPIA PSY-5 scales, if his responses could be taken as accurate, indicate he apparently holds some unusual beliefs that suggest he may be somewhat disengaged from reality. Correct?
You read that correctly, yes.
His high score on psychoticism scale, 97T, suggests he often feels alienated from others and may experience unusual symptoms such as delusional beliefs, circumstantial and tangential thinking, and loosening of associations. Correct?
Except you said may instead of might, but yes.
Okay. Let's go to page 16 of your report, third paragraph down. You wrote, in terms of diagnostic considerations for this MMPI-A, some adolescents with this clinical profile are considered to have personality problems. However, the possibility of schizophrenia should be ruled out. Philip reports numerous bizarre thoughts and behaviors. If these experiences cannot be explained by alcohol or other drug intoxication, organic problems, a misunderstanding of these items, or an intentional exaggeration of psychopathology, a psychotic process should be considered. Correct?
You read that correctly.
If I could have a moment. Now, you testified concerning a intelligence tests that were given by someone else, not you, correct? I can rephrase it.
You can have the area of inquiry that based on Commonwealth versus Chapel. Is it to the characterization of the question?
Yes.
All right, sustained. But you can have the area of inquiry, but I'll sustain objection to the characterization of the testimony.
You testified that Philip Chism took a whisk for in 2013? You're aware that Mr. Chism took an intelligence test, or an IQ, a test of cognitive ability, we'll call it, to be precise, the WISC-4 in March of 2014?
I am aware of that, yes.
And his scores were in the normal range?
Some of his scores were in the high average range. All of his scores were within the normal range, yes.
Now, he also, you received some test data concerning WMS-4. I'm not sure what, is that called the Wechsler, or?
That's the Wechsler Memory Scale, fourth edition.
And that's a test similar things to the WISC, is that right?
The Wechsler Memory Scale is a test of learning and memory. The WISC-4 is a test of intelligence.
Now, on the Wechsler test, Philip did quite poorly, correct?
They're both Wechsler tests.
Okay.
So on the WISC-4, he scored normally when he was given the Wechsler and two subtests from the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Adults, the fourth edition of that. He scored below the first percentile on tests that he had scored in the high average range the year before.
And how many subtests are in the later test that was given? If the test in full, the later test, where he only was given two subtests, what is a full test? How many subtests does it have?
If you're giving the core part of the test, there are optionals that you can add. There are 10 subtests.
And only two were given?
Yes, only two were given. As far as I can tell, that's all I received. I wasn't there, so I don't know for certain.
I could have a moment.
Sure.
Your Honor, I'm done.
Okay. Give me the rest.
Dr. Hebben, I believe ultimately you've testified that you administered 7 tests. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And it was elicited on cross-examination that 5 of those 7 tests were positive for malingering. Is that correct? 2 were effort, and the other 5 showed up positive for malingering. Is that correct?
There are no symptom validity scales on the Beck Youth Inventory, so I would have to say 4.
Okay. So let me ask you this, though. The MMPIA that you administered, is the primary purpose of that test to test for malingering?
No, it's not.
What is the primary purpose of the MMPIA?
To get an assessment of whether or not there's psychopathology, to get a sense of a person's emotional report, somatic report. It's really to assist in diagnosis.
And Ms. Regan elicited from your report some of the symptoms that were reported in MMPIA, which included the possibility, such that the possibility of schizophrenia should be ruled out. Is that correct?
She did, yes.
Okay. But in fact, can you even get that far with evaluating those responses on the MMPIA?
No, you cannot, because the symptom validity tests contained within there indicated that the profile was invalid as an accurate representation of his state of personality, psychopathology at that point in time, and that was actually contained in one of the sentences that Ms. Reagan read out loud.
Because if he's reporting every symptom or too many symptoms or a number of symptoms that don't appear together in a person who's genuinely mentally ill, then you can't credit those symptoms. Is that correct?
Objection, leading.
It is. I'll sustain it.
Well, Ms. Regan had read to you the sentence after the part about the possibility of schizophrenia. Philip reported numerous bizarre thoughts and behaviors. If these experiences cannot be explained by alcohol or other drug intoxication, organic problems, a misunderstanding of the items, or an intentional exaggeration of psychopathology, a psychotic process should be considered. And that's on page 16 of your report that Ms. Regan read you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this case, did the test flag for any of those particular alternatives?
Yes.
What was that?
Intentional exaggeration of psychopathology.
And again, with respect to the BASC, is the primary purpose of the BASC to test for malingering?
No, it is not.
And were you able, but did you come across an issue in the validity scales of the BASC?
Yes.
And again, what was that?
Excessive negativity and a tendency toward fake bad.
So again, to the extent the BASC should give you a reading of negative symptoms, etc., were you able to trust those?
No.
And then the test that you did for malingering, what were the results of those tests?
The tests that are specifically designed to assess feigning of mental illnesses were both positive for feigning of mental illness.
And doctor, you were asked some questions about the number of questions involved in total and the number of hours you spent with Mr. Chism without a break. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember when in that time frame you did the test that tests for effort?
The tests for effort were, I can't be certain, but probably closer to the beginning.
And certainly the tests for effort were the tests that Mr. Chism tested normal on. Is that correct?
Correct.
The dots and the toms, is that correct?
The Tom, yes.
Tom, okay. Now, you were asked some questions about whether mentally ill people actually experience, severely mentally ill people actually experience ringing in their ears. Is that correct?
I was asked a question, yes.
And in fact, is there a reason that a symptom would be suggested in that particular test and then followed up on?
Yes.
What is that reason?
Because sometimes when you suggest a symptom to someone, they will then, and you were to inform them that this is something that someone with a severe mental illness would do, they will then display that symptom for you to demonstrate that they have a severe mental illness.
And in fact, with respect to that particular question, the defendant endorsed that symptom, didn't he? Objection.
Well, I suppose it's leading, but it's a response to the cross. But if your objection is leading, I'll sustain it, although it's academic, I think.
I'd like to be heard.
Sure.
Dr. Hebben, the two Wechsler tests that were just discussed, have you administered those tests yourself on other people, not the defendant?
Thousands of times.
Okay. And you've sort of given us a lesson in the different kind of testing you do. How would you characterize those two tests? What kinds of tests are they?
The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 4th edition, is a measure of intelligence that you give to children and adolescents. The Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, 4th edition, is an intelligence test that you give to adults.
And understanding one is for adolescents and children and one is for adults, would you expect a dramatic difference in the results of those two tests?
No, the tests are highly correlated.
And does it make sense to you, as someone who administers these tests, that even on two areas, someone's tests should go from the average to high average to below the first percentile in over a year?
It does not make any sense at all. It should not happen, and there is likely, in the absence of any kind of significant horrible brain event, there is only one explanation.
And what is that explanation?
Person was purposely feigning that they were unable to do now cognitive tests.
And with respect to, if you were giving someone this test, knowing how they did on the Wechsler a year earlier, would you have continued the testing if you had gotten these results in these two areas?
I would have continued the testing, correct.
But in this case, to the best of your knowledge, only two areas were tested on, and they tested at below the first percentile.
From what I saw from the raw test data, only two subtests from the WAIS-4 were administered, the first two.
And to be clear, the first set of testing you received on the Wechsler was from March of 14, and the second set from June 25th of 2015.
Yes, I think the first one was March 18th, 2014 was when the children's IQ test was given.
Would you expect someone with genuine testing below the first percentile on those two areas of the adult version to be functioning in an academic setting or functioning particularly in the world?
No, those scores would put someone at the level of intellectually disabled, which is the term now used in place of mental retardation.
I have nothing further for this witness.
Anything from the redirect for Cross, Ms. Regan? Ladies and gentlemen, you've probably figured out by now that the redirect is limited to what happened on cross, and the recross is limited to what happened on redirect.
You were not present for the testing you just talked about, correct?
No, all I had were the raw test data, which demonstrated the way Mr.
That's
Chism
not my
responded.
question. My question is, you were not present for the testing, correct?
That's correct.
Now, and you've concluded, based on the test results, that Mr. Chism was feigning, correct?
I have, yes.
And it also could have been a deliberate sabotage by an adolescent who just didn't want to take the test, correct?
Well, that would be feigning.
And you have no idea if Mr. Chism was sick that day, correct?
Your Honor, can we be seen at sidebar?
Sure. Any regret? All right, thank you, Doctor. Commonwealth's next witness, please.
Commonwealth calls Dr. Robert Kinscherf. Your Honor, can we be seen on one brief issue at sidebar while he's coming in?
Sure. Come right up.
So if you stop right there and raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now and hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Sir, come up. Keep the microphone comfortable.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Your Honor.
There's been a motion to sequester witnesses in the case, so until all the evidence is over, you can only be in the courtroom when you testify and not talk about your testimony or the other witnesses. Well, let them talk about the issue.
I understand, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. McDougal, please.
Good morning, Dr. Kinscherf. In a loud, clear voice, can you state your first and last names, please?
Robert Kinscherf.
And can you spell your first and your last name?
Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T. Kinscherf, K-I-N-S-C-H-E-R-F-F.
Dr. Kinscherf, how are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed primarily at William James College, which is a graduate school of psychology here in the Boston area. I'm there as an associate vice president. My portfolio of responsibilities are the programs at our school that provide direct services to people. I'm also on the faculty of the doctoral program in clinical psychology and also on the teaching faculty of the school psychology program.
And Dr. Kinscherf, can you briefly describe for us your educational background, please?
I received my bachelor's degree in political science and social sciences at the University of California at Berkeley in 1972. Received a master's degree in philosophy from the University of Chicago in 1980. My PhD in clinical psychology with a child emphasis from the City University of New York in 1988, and my law degree from Harvard Law School in 1992.
And Doctor, do you work primarily at this time as a psychologist or as a doctor or some combination thereof?
Almost all of my practice is as a psychologist.
And specifically with respect to your employment in areas of psychology, can you describe for us, let me ask you this, how long have you been in your current position at William James?
In my current position since 2012, I believe.
And where were you employed full-time before that?
Prior to that time, I had been employed also at William James College, but not as a senior administrator. I was the director of forensic services for that period of time, and I had held positions at Easter Seals of New Hampshire, while also acting as a consultant on juvenile court clinics to the Administrative Office of the Juvenile Court.
And specifically with respect to your duties at Easter Seals of New Hampshire, what type of an agency is the Easter Seals of New Hampshire, and what were your responsibilities?
Easter Seals of New Hampshire is a large social and clinical services provider. I was the director of clinical services. My responsibilities there included clinical oversight for a residential treatment program for children and a risk assessment and management program for the agency.
Now, Doctor, you indicated in that time you were also doing some work for the Office of the Trial Court for the Juvenile Court Clinic. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, how long have you done work of a variety of types for the Juvenile Court Clinic?
I first became involved with the Juvenile Court Clinic in 1985 and for a time was a staff member there. I subsequently became the Director of Juvenile Court Clinic Services in the Administrative Office of the Juvenile Court and served in that role from about 1998 or 1999 until 2005 when I left for service at the Department of Mental Health. In that particular job at the Department of Mental Health, I also had an ongoing professional relationship with the Administrative Office of the Juvenile Court because the Department of Mental Health and the trial court jointly administer the Juvenile Court Clinic services. And in my role as an Assistant Commissioner at DMH, that was within my job responsibilities.
And with your work for the juvenile court, have you done evaluations of different kinds for the Juvenile Court Clinic?
Yes, I have.
What types of evaluations have you done?
I've done evaluations in delinquency matters, child abuse and neglect, status offender matters, children who are runaway, truant, stubborn. I've seen a range of cases over the years from very, very minor truancy cases to homicide cases.
And Dr. Kinscherf, when you've done evaluations through the Juvenile Court Clinic, are they for a party, meaning one side or the other, or are they at the judge's behest, or both?
They're done under court order. I have done other work retained by counsel, but when it's through the juvenile court or the juvenile court clinics, it's always directly by order of the court.
The judge has asked that an evaluation be done not for one side or for the other, but for the court's purposes.
That's correct.
Now, Doctor, I think I sort of skipped over this, but can you describe any licensures that you hold at this time?
Yes, I'm admitted to the bar as an attorney in Massachusetts, but my primary work in psychology is covered under 3 licenses. I'm licensed in New Hampshire and Massachusetts and Texas.
And Doctor, can you explain to us what the certificate program means to be a designated forensic professional, a designated forensic mental health supervisor, and a designated juvenile court clinician?
Some years ago, the trial court and the Department of Mental Health decided to implement a process of education and training for people who would be doing court-ordered evaluations in the trial court. On the adult side, these people are called designated forensic professionals, DFPs. They are doctoral level psychologists and psychiatrists. On the juvenile side, they are called certified juvenile court clinicians. I have been trained both as a DFP and as a CJCC, as they are called, and I'm also qualified to serve essentially as a supervisor or instructor for those who are in training to earn those certifications.
And how far back does your designation go?
May I check my CV?
Sure.
I know the designated forensic professional goes back probably to the mid to late 1980s, but let me just check here briefly. And I'm sorry, if you have a page.
Page 2.
Page 2, thank you. Designated forensic professional from 1993 and ongoing. Designated forensic mental health supervisor from 1994 and still ongoing. And since 2001, and ongoing designated juvenile court clinician and mentor. Levels 1 and 2. Levels 1 and 2 differentiate between those cases which are routinely before the juvenile court but do not always have specific legal questions before them. Level 2 designates specific training and competency to stand trial and criminal responsibility evaluations.
And Dr. Kinscherf, do you also do writing and research?
I do.
Have you been published in peer-reviewed journals?
I have.
On what types of topics have you been published in peer-reviewed journals?
My publications cover a range including ethics and law in professional practice, risk assessment and management of violent offenders, both juvenile and adults, violent non-sexual offenders and juvenile sexual offenders, approaches to forensic evaluation.
And Doctor, did you recently receive a professional honor regarding the American Psychological Association?
Yes, I was recently designated a fellow of the American Psychological Association.
And how does one get designated a fellow?
That is a process by which candidates are reviewed and then approved by the board of the American Psychological Association. It's an award intended to recognize professional contributions over the course of a career.
And Dr. Kinscherf, have you previously testified in the state and federal courts of Massachusetts and New England?
I have, yes.
And in terms of your, how long has it been that you've been a testifying witness in the state courts of Massachusetts?
Since the beginning of my employment at the Boston Juvenile Court Clinic in the early 1980s.
In understanding some of those times you are testifying not on anyone's behalf but at the behest of the court, is that correct?
Well, each of the times that I would have been in that professional role, it would have been for that purpose.
Okay. Meaning work for the court clinic?
Work for the court clinic, yes. It would have been under court order.
But you've indicated that there have been times since your work for the court clinic has become somewhat less that you've also been retained by one side or the other to do an evaluation and testify to those results. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And with respect to your work in, and does that include work in both, well, why don't I just ask you, what courts have you testified in, Doctor?
I've testified in district courts and superior courts. My agreement with the juvenile court is that I will not take any juvenile court matters while I have any kind of professional relationship with the court.
Have you also had occasion to either testify for or do work in federal court?
Yes, I have.
And where is that?
I've done work and testified in the federal district courts in New Hampshire and in Vermont.
And Dr. Kinscherf, with respect to when you've testified in the federal courts of New Hampshire and Vermont, has that been as a retained expert?
It has, yes.
And for which side?
I think for the federal courts in New Hampshire, it's largely been prosecution through the federal attorney's office for those districts.
And with respect to your testimony in the state courts of Massachusetts, how much of your work has been retained by the prosecution versus retained by the defense?
Most of it, actually, a significant majority of it has been retained by the defense, mostly through the Committee for Public Counsel Services.
Now, Doctor, in this particular case, were you retained well, let me ask you this before I go to that. During the work that you've described or other work that I haven't had you describe, have you had occasion to work with children and adolescents, particularly adolescents, experiencing psychosis?
Yes.
How, let me ask you this, what is the range of illness that has been experienced by the young people that you've worked with over your career?
The range of illnesses that I have seen have been children where if they warranted a diagnosis at all, it would be one like an adjustment disorder, which simply reflects a kind of a transient, stressful time in a person's life where they may have more trouble sleeping or focusing or something like that. At one extreme, and at the other extreme, I have worked with children who have been profoundly impaired by a psychotic disorder, by an autism spectrum disorder, bipolar disorder, very serious mental illnesses.
I'm sorry. Doctor, have you only worked with those young people in a forensic evaluation setting, or have you worked with them in a clinical setting as well?
I've worked with them in a clinical setting as well, often as a consultant to hospitals, inpatient units, or clinicians who have a particularly complicated case, but I also was responsible for the care of the children at the Easter Seals residential facility.
And did the children at the Easter Seals facility span that range of symptoms and mental illness when you were in charge of their care?
They didn't span the full range. They were largely children who were sufficiently impaired that they were difficult or impossible to maintain in the community, and so they were in a facilities-based care.
Now, Doctor, based on your training and experience, how common is severe psychosis in young children?
It's uncommon.
If you were treating, say, a 10-year-old who you just determined was overtly psychotic, what, if any, steps would you take?
If I was treating a child at that age who was suffering from psychotic symptoms, I would certainly seek a medication consultation from a skilled child and adolescent psychiatrist with a particular focus upon the management of psychotic illnesses in children. I would request psychological testing in order to get more information about the functional capacities of the child and the degree to which the psychosis was impairing their function. I would try and work with the parents or other caregivers in order to help them understand the illness and management strategies to minimize the impact of functioning upon that child.
And in your experience, when you're dealing with a child who's experiencing overt psychosis, would it be obvious to a caregiver?
Yes. I would say that particularly over a period of time, what you tend to see in younger children, particularly of the age you're describing, 9, 10, and 11, is a period of time where there may be some initial withdrawal of a child, for example, which might be attributed initially to stress or worries, kind of nonspecific, not entirely clear. But the course over time for young children is to have more clear symptoms and to express them, especially since younger children don't always grasp how strange they may look to other people in terms of their behavior. And it would be characteristic of a young child with a psychotic disorder to show impairment over time and underachieve in multiple domains. So a child who used to have friends withdraws. A child who used to be able to do well in school suddenly is unable to achieve in school, or over time is unable to achieve in school. They lose interest in activities that they've previously been interested in. Some of them will report or acknowledge, if asked, that they're having unusual kinds of experiences. Auditory or visual hallucinations. In younger children, visual hallucinations are more common at the outset.
Now, can you explain to us the relationship, as you understand it based on your training and experience, between an adolescent experiencing mental health symptoms and how you would expect that to develop into or not develop into a subsequent mental illness diagnosis as an adult?
There will be young people who will show what is called a prodrome. This is sort of a cluster of symptoms and impairments. Many of these often start off as the so-called negative symptoms. These are things like lack of interest in things, social withdrawal, kind of oddities of thought that they may or may not share with other people. Over time, some of these young children or these adolescents will develop more explicit so-called active symptoms, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, delusions. They may have, in fact, as they move towards a clearer picture of a psychotic disorder, they frequently will show very disorganized speech, sometimes even seeming to be incoherent or completely sort of uncommunicative. They're speaking, but they're really not making much sense. Significantly disorganized behaviors that people will notice. Often that cluster comes together in the late teens to mid-20s if they're going to develop a diagnosis like schizophrenia, and they'll be diagnosed on the basis of a first psychotic break.
And what is the typical age of diagnosis for full-blown schizophrenia?
For a first psychotic break, it's usually late teens into early 20s. There are times when people have a psychotic break or symptoms of psychosis, and they never go on to develop a full picture of schizophrenia, which is a chronic illness in most people that will continue to impair them over the course of their lifetime to varying degrees and need to be managed. But it might take depending upon what the first psychotic break looked like, it might take a second clear break for somebody to then receive the diagnosis of schizophrenia.
Now, doctor, in July of 2015, were you retained to do a forensic evaluation of Philip Chism?
Yes, I was.
And by whom were you retained?
I was retained by you.
And what is what do you look to get to begin a forensic evaluation of someone Philip Chism's age for criminal responsibility?
I look to get as much information about the individual as I can. I am particularly interested in a detailed developmental history that might help me understand whether or not at the time of the offense they were possibly suffering from a mental illness or a mental defect ordinarily thought of as some kind of intellectual disability. So I would be interested in a developmental history. This would include relationships with their friends, their school functioning, their relationships with their families, their interests and activities, their medical history, their prior legal history, whether or not they've had any prior history of being identified as having psychological difficulties for purposes of special educational planning or evaluation or treatment as an outpatient.
And were you able to obtain information initially before you began the process of meeting with Philip Chism?
Yes.
And what role does your actual interactions yourself with Philip Chism play in your ultimate evaluation?
There are a couple of roles that my interactions with him play. The first is to try and see this young person in the context of the developmental history that I've been able to review, gather together, and try and understand him first as a young person. Then I will use the initial interviews to make some threshold determinations as to whether or not psychological testing might be helpful or other kinds of consultation or evaluation. I will also begin the process of gathering, when I can, the defendant's account of the events, their own understanding of what occurred, what, if any, relationship there is between any signs or symptoms of mental illness or defect. And I will try and put together as comprehensive a picture as I can of the person's functioning up to the date of the offense. I like to do that as an initial stage because there is a phenomenon known as hindsight bias. It's the phenomenon that all of us have. We all know on Monday morning what the better call would have been in a football game. And so we tend, if we're not careful, to look back and say, aha, this all links together, this all makes sense. So I like to sort of stop just before the date of offense and say, if somebody had brought me this young person on that day, what would I have gathered? What would I have thought was going on? Or would I have thought they were significantly ill or impaired as a result of a mental illness or other factor? And then I like to move forward in time to sort of see how this picture fits together in terms of the offense that they have been charged with.
And do you make an evaluation, or do you also gather information regarding the offense that they were charged with as part of your evaluation?
Yes, I try to get as much information as I can because I'm trying to put together all of the pieces of the puzzle. So it's important to me to have a fairly detailed account, if at all possible, of what has transpired down to what people said, how people behaved.
Now, doctor, in this particular case, did you, can you describe for us the sources of information that you ultimately used in forming your opinion regarding the criminal responsibility of Philip Chism?
Yes, may I, they're voluminous, so I'll do sort of a summary, but may I refer to my
Is your
report to
memory
do that, Your
exhausted
Honor?
as to the details of your sources of information, Doctor?
I'm sorry?
Is your memory exhausted as to all of the sources of information you relied on?
Well, let me give it a start then.
Okay.
No objections to Dr. Kinscherf reading if he wants.
Okay, all right.
Whichever you
may
prefer,
refer
Doctor.
to your notes if it helps you refresh your memory. There's no objection to the foundation.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start, and then if I need more detail or if I think I may have left something out, I'll check. I interviewed Philip Chism on a number of occasions between July and October 3rd of this year for a total of approximately 13 hours. I reviewed psychological testing reports conducted by Dr. Hebben and Dr. Casey. I also reviewed reports that had been prepared by defense experts. I reviewed medical records, legal records, educational records of Philip Chism and his family members. I reviewed crime scene photographs, surveillance tapes. I read in transcripts but also listened to interviews of persons that had been approached and interviewed in the course of the investigation by both the defense and the prosecution, persons in Tennessee, family members, students at Danvers High School, faculty members at Danvers High School. I also walked through the school in order to sort of put together the scene in my head so I could sort of understand a little bit more than I did from looking at surveillance tapes, which were a little disjointed, seen in isolation for me. I also went and examined evidence in the evidence room that maintained by the Commonwealth, and amongst the things that I looked at there were items belonging to Mr. Chism that had been located at the scene, including some schoolwork and other things that were in backpacks, knapsacks, items belonging to Mr. Chism, apparently a box cutter, for example, clothing, and items belonging to the victim.
And, Doctor, just for clarification's sake, you indicated you ultimately reviewed reports of defense experts. Did you have those prior to completing your own report in this case?
No, I did not.
And, Doctor, ultimately, based on all of those sources of information, did you reach an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty regarding the criminal responsibility of Philip Chism?
Yes, I did.
And before you just testify to that opinion, can you tell us what you look at, what you're looking for in forming an opinion as to criminal responsibility?
In forming an opinion about criminal responsibility, I'm essentially walking through the legal standard for it. I'm first looking for whether or not there is evidence of a mental disease or defect as it's understood under the law. I then look to see whether or not, if there was a mental disease or defect, there is evidence that the defendant was substantially impaired in their ability to either appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of their act or to conform their conduct to the requirements of law. So I'm essentially marching through the legal standard, trying to put the information and evidence that I have into this kind of logical progression.
And with respect to whether Philip Chism was suffering a mental disease or defect on October 22nd of 2013, did you reach an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty?
I did.
What was that opinion?
My opinion is that on the date of the alleged offense, Mr. Chism was not suffering from a mental disease or defect.
And despite having reached that opinion, did you go on to march along through the rest of the standard?
Yes, I did.
And did you reach an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty as to whether he understood the wrongfulness of his conduct and could conform his conduct to the requirements of the law?
I did reach an opinion onto that.
What was that opinion?
My opinion was that although Mr. Chism at the time may have been showing some indications of distress or emotional disturbance, that to the extent to which they were present, they did not substantially impair his capacity to distinguish the wrongfulness or criminality of his act, to identify that, nor did it substantially impair his ability to conform his conduct to the requirements of law.
And to be clear, Doctor, you're looking back to October 22nd of 2013, is that correct?
That's correct.
And how do you go about doing that? You talked a little bit about this hindsight effect, but how do you go about, because when you saw Philip Chism, it was in July, August, September, and October of 2015, correct?
That's correct.
What tools do you use to look back?
I use a variety of approaches. One of the things that I try to do is to collect what information I can about of observations of individuals near the time, at the time, or subsequent to the time of the alleged offense. So people who may have interacted with the individual. I look closely at records if an individual has been maintained in a facility where there is staffing that maintains continuous observation over an individual. I will look to see whether or not there are other evaluations or testings that have been done closer to the time of the offense. Because we're looking at the state of the mind of the individual at the time of the offense, it's really important to get as much information that's specific to that time frame and shortly after to really sort of understand what was going at that period of time. In this particular case, I also thought it was important to ask for psychological testing, which was subsequently conducted by Drs. Hebben and Casey, and I also spent a great deal of time with the defendant trying to understand what his experiences were over the course of his life, to be sure, but most specifically around the time of the alleged offense.
And without going into anything the defendant said to you, can you please relay to us your observations of Mr. Chism's demeanor and any other observations you made during the 13 hours or so that you spent with him?
Yes. Mr. Chism's demeanor for the most part was relatively reserved, at times guarded, at times guarded to the point that he terminated the interviews with me rather than to respond to questions or even to move on to other questions, because I had told him that if there were things he didn't want to respond to, he could just tell me and we would move on. There were times when he seemed to be distracted, looking off into space, but he was readily brought back from those distractions, if you will, focused easily, and at no time did I find his thought process incoherent, difficult to follow. At no time did I find his ability to communicate to me to be impaired at times that I thought he wanted me to understand something. There were moments, particularly when he was talking about things that he wanted me to pay attention to or which were of interest to him, when he was fairly animated.
Different than he was sort of overall?
Yes. Along a continuum, he was always reserved. I would never have described him as somebody who was exuberant or engaging in the kinds of humor that adolescents often do. But there were times when he was clearly more interested in some topics rather than others, either to help me understand something he was trying to convey to me or because it was a topic of interest to him.
Now, and fair to say, Doctor, that your interactions with Mr. Chism over those 13 hours were significant to your ultimate opinion in this case?
Yes.
Doctor, you, I believe, had indicated one of your other sources of information were records regarding Mr. Chism's family. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And specifically, did that involve records which had been admitted of the defendant's maternal grandmother and maternal aunt?
That's correct.
And in your review of those records, what was the overall diagnosis for the defendants? Let me ask you this, did they have the same diagnosis or did they vary?
There was a little, if my recollection is correct, there was a little discrepancy in diagnosis in that I believe one of the relatives at one point received a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but on balance, the consensus of the diagnosis appeared to be schizoaffective disorder.
For both of them?
That's my recollection.
And what is schizoaffective disorder?
Schizoaffective disorder is a psychotic disorder in which a person's psychosis varies with swings in their mood.
And how does it differ from schizophrenia?
In schizophrenia, while you can have some variation in mood, particularly when a person is actively psychotic, people with schizophrenia over time tend actually to have flattening of mood. That's part of the so-called negative symptoms. They tend to have a flatter, less responsive mood that is often linked with what's called avolition, which is an inability to sort of engage yourself in goal-directed behavior or to be interested in things to a degree that you're significantly impaired.
And now, Dr. was your review of those family records significant at all to your ultimate diagnosis or ultimate opinion with respect to Mr. Chism?
Yes, they were.
How so?
I took account of this family history of psychotic disorder in the form of schizoaffective disorder, and so I wanted to be as thorough as I could about the possibility of an emerging psychotic disorder or the possibility that Mr. Chism was experiencing a prodromal phase of a psychotic disorder, specifically schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia at the time of the alleged offense.
And did you take into account other information that you ultimately received in your assessment of those possibilities?
Yes, I did.
Now, you had indicated that you requested certain testing from Dr. Kelly Casey and Dr. Nancy Hebben. Is that correct?
That's correct.
With respect to Dr. Casey, did you request a particular test or did you leave that to her?
I requested a particular test of Dr. Casey.
And which test was that?
That was the Rorschach ink blot test.
And were the results of that test significant to your ultimate opinion in this case?
Yes, they were.
How so?
On this particular tool, there was no indication of a psychotic process. There was indication that at times Mr. Chism will rely on fantasy as kind of a defense mechanism, but that he had no difficulty distinguishing between what is reality and what is fantasy.
And you also enlisted Dr. Nancy Hebben to do some testing, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And how were those tests selected and by whom?
I told her the kinds of information that I was looking to elicit, and she chose the instruments.
And ultimately, did you receive a report from her regarding the testing that she did?
I did.
Was that report significant to your ultimate opinion regarding Mr. Chism's criminal responsibility?
It was.
And how so?
It was important for me to get a picture of Mr. Chism's current functioning, and she did that through the behavioral assessment tool. I had also asked her to investigate specifically the possibility of a psychotic disorder, and I had also asked her to assess the possibility of malingering.
And how were her results significant to you in ruling out or including those two possibilities?
On the basis of her testing, I could not find in the valid tests a basis to support a diagnosis of a psychotic disorder. On the basis of the two instruments that she used to assess malingering, I decided that I needed to actively consider this as a rule-out hypothesis for Mr. Chism.
Meaning ruling out that he was malingering?
Yes. that I had to be very thoughtful about the possibility that the self-reports that he was giving me were either entirely fabricated or exaggerating experiences he may actually be having.
Do you, when you were meeting with Mr. Chism, did you have the results of Dr. Hebben or Dr. Casey's testing, or did you receive that after? Do you remember?
I had met with him, I think, twice or perhaps a third time before I had the results of the testing back.
Now, excuse me, let me ask you this as a general matter, not regarding Mr. Chism. When you are assessing, let me ask you this, what's an auditory hallucination? You referenced that, I think, earlier in your testimony.
Sorry to interrupt you. It sounds like you're moving to a slightly different area.
I am.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the morning recess. I have a couple of matters to talk to counsel about, so the recess may be more than 20 minutes, but I'm going to do my best to keep it as short as we can. Don't discuss the case among yourselves with anybody else. First thing I'll do when you come back from the court is make sure you follow those instructions.
All rise.
Assuming, Ms. Regan, that we finish the testimony today and the charge conferences tomorrow morning, you indicated that you thought that the defendant wished to waive his presence. Is that correct? Okay. Could you stand and raise your right hand, sir?
Do you solemnly swear you'll make true answers to such questions that may be put to you by the court or upon its direction, so help you God?
Sir, have you taken any prescription medication, narcotics, or alcohol today?
Yes.
Can you tell me what you've taken, please?
Prescription medication.
And what kind?
Hospital.
And do you feel like that medication is in any way interfering with your ability to understand what's happening today?
No.
Do you feel like you have a clear mind, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's been brought to my attention by your attorneys that you wish not to be present tomorrow for what's called the charge conference, the conference I'll have with the lawyers about how to instruct the jury on the law. Do you understand what's meant by a charge conference, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And you have an absolute right to be present at that charge conference where I will be making decisions on my jury instructions. It's your right under the Constitution to be present for all of that. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes.
Also, you can also waive your right to be present or give it up. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes.
Now, I've been told that you do not wish to be present for the charge conference tomorrow. Is that true, sir?
Yes.
Has anyone forced you or threatened you to make that decision?
No.
Have you had enough time to talk to your attorneys about that decision, sir?
Yes.
Do you understand that should tonight you change your mind, that you could change your mind about that?
Yes.
Okay. And are you making this decision to not be present for the charge conference knowingly, of your own free will, and voluntarily, sir?
Yes.
And have I confused you with any of my questions?
No.
All right. I'm going to require, in this instance, although I'm going to require in this instance that there be a signed waiver form by the defendant and certified by counsel as well. All right. You may be seated, sir. Okay. I'm going to, so that we can get as much done today and hopefully get through everything, take, I hope, 2 minutes. Probably impossible for me to only take 2 minutes on anything, but be that as it may, 2 minutes to talk about the felony murder issue. And the first one it's just, there's still the line that was missing is still missing, and attempted rape is not a light felony, although it can be, as you have all understood and indicated, a predicate for felony murder. Remember, the specific intent for the felony murder is the specific intent to commit an aggravated rape. Within the specific intent to commit an aggravated rape is specific intent to commit the rape by serious bodily injury or through an assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Obviously, there's specific intent is not required for the aggravated rape, but it is required for the attempted. And for the assault and battery with a dangerous weapon issue as it relates to the attempt, there is case law that talks about, in Commonwealth versus Brown, I think the case is, I don't remember the site off the top of my head, 66 Mass Appeals Court, I don't remember the pinpoint site, talking about that there has to be some action that constitutes, for the purposes of this case, an assault and battery with a dangerous weapon beyond the what's need to accomplish the unnatural sexual intercourse. So that needs to be in the instruction as well, and that the crime not be completed. And for the attempt, the defendant's state of mind has to be that, Ms. Ritzer need not be alive. At the time of the overt act, he needs to believe that she is. And so I think if you listed them all, I didn't just count, there's probably 6 intents within intents within intents that I've gone through, and they all have to be outlined, and they're not in the proposal. I want to see if we can finish this witness today, so I am going to stop talking, and I assume any discussion of this can wait from the Commonwealth's perspective, and I assume from the defendant's perspective it can wait. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can reconvene at 11:15 then. Okay. Yes, please, Ms. McDougall.
Now, Doctor, I just want to go back for a moment, Dr. Kinscherf. Dr. Kinscherf, you talked about sort of the rarity of the response you would have to a child who was experiencing psychosis at age 10. Is that correct?
Yes.
How long do you expect that a child of that age would be able to keep anyone from realizing what was wrong with that child?
That would ordinarily be a matter of weeks to perhaps a handful of months, largely because of the deterioration in functioning across a number of the child's different domains. Often shows up first in peer relationships and schoolwork and withdrawal in the family. But a period of 4 years where there was not this kind of indication of deterioration of function would be extremely, extremely rare.
Now, Doctor, you also
in fact, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It would be both rare, and it would not allow the child to actually meet the qualifying criteria for the diagnosis, because the child wouldn't be manifesting the deterioration of functioning that is required for giving the diagnosis in the first place.
If the disease was progressing sufficiently to meet the diagnosis, there's no way anyone could miss it. Is that correct?
Objection, leading.
Well, I'll sustain the objection.
Can you explain again, Doctor?
Yes, the diagnosis of schizophrenia requires a period of active, observable symptoms or reported symptoms for at least 6 months, a briefer time if the person has been identified earlier and is under treatment. But the hallmark of the disorder is its impairments in functioning across a variety of different life domains. In children, most importantly, school, peer relationships, and family relationships.
Now, Doctor, you also talked about that you have worked with children experiencing acute psychosis, including auditory hallucinations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what are the kinds of questions you ask when making an assessment as to the reliability of someone reporting auditory hallucinations?
I will take a history of the experiences of auditory hallucination, age of onset, pattern. Do they wax and wane? Are they pretty consistent? So age of onset, pattern. Are they inside the head, outside the head? What are they saying? Are the voices saying things that are negative and insulting? Are the voices more grandiose and telling you how fabulous you are? Are the voices frightening to the child? Are the voices directing them to behave in particular ways? I will also look to see whether or not when the child experiences them, how distracting they are for the child. For many children, if they have one or more voices going on in their head, they find it difficult to pay attention to what's going on outside of them. I will look to see whether or not other persons with whom this child lives or interacts has noticed this kind of internal absorption or noticed them frequently talking to themselves or responding to parties that don't seem to be there, self-reports to other people.
And what are the kinds of, the things you've just described, what are the kind of red flags you might hear that would make you wonder if the report of voices was accurate?
Amongst the things that would raise a red flag for me are differences in report as to age of onset, the circumstances under which they began, significant variations in the course that they have taken since their onset, significant variations as to what the voices are saying, how many voices, if that changes over time, who those voices may represent. For example, are they people in their real life, but they now see them or hear them when they're not present? Are they sort of amorphous, unidentified voices? They're not quite sure who they are, or sometimes they're muffled, even what they're saying. Are they the voices of aliens or fantastic creatures or animals or whatever it is that they're identifying them as? So one of the things that I'm looking for is consistency of report, particularly where that consistency of report is also consistent with what we know about the unfolding of the disease process and the ways in which these voices tend to, for example, intensify at times when people are showing other signs of distress or illness. They naturally sort of wax and wane over time.
Now, Doctor, returning to your evaluation of Philip Chism, you indicated just now that one of the things you would want to consider in any evaluation is those people who have lived with the individual. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In this case, were you able to speak with the person with whom Philip Chism was living at the time of the offense?
I was not.
And why was that?
She declined to speak with me.
And she being whom?
His mother.
Now, did you, I think you've indicated you had an opportunity to view surveillance video from Danvers High School. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was the video from Danvers High School significant to your ultimate opinion in this case?
It was.
And Doctor, if I could direct your attention to the screen where Exhibit 51, I expect will momentarily be played. And Doctor, specifically, did you view video of Philip Chism arriving at school the morning of October 22nd?
Yes, or it seemed to be that's what was happening, either arriving at school or coming down towards a class.
If we could play the first video. Doctor, was there anything significant to you in forming your opinion regarding the video that we've just played from Exhibit 51 of Mr. Chism walking down the hall?
Not at that point. I simply noted how he was dressed, the color of his sweatshirt, and he was apparently in possession of 3 bags.
And did you also view video of Mr. Chism's movements in the school immediately prior to Ms. Ritzer's last period class that day?
Yes.
If we could move to that video. I don't have a number. If we could move to video. I apologize, Your Honor. No. Back. Sorry. The video on the screen, do you recognize this video as video you considered in reaching your ultimate opinion, Doctor?
Yes.
And again, was this video from which you could draw any conclusions alone, or was it only in context of other images that you watched?
Only in context. I would, on that particular video, be noting his demeanor and behavior.
And if we could move. Doctor, fair to say you're familiar with this video?
Yes.
And Doctor, the video of Mr. Chism following Ms. Ritzer down the hall, was that video significant to your ultimate opinion in this case regarding his criminal responsibility?
Yes. First, I note the change of clothing to a hooded sweatshirt. I note that he comes out of the classroom. He looks in both directions up and down the hall. From that, I infer that he was possibly looking to see if there were other people in the hall who might observe him. He looked briefly up at the surveillance camera area, stepped back into the classroom, reemerged with the hood up over his face, over his head, from which I inferred that he may be attempting to obscure his identity as he moves out into the hall and follows her.
And how do those observations play into your specific analysis as to whether he understood the wrongfulness of his conduct and could conform his conduct to the requirements of the law on October 22nd?
Obscuring his identity and making sure that there were not people in the hall who would observe him leave would be consistent with an inference that he appreciated the wrongfulness of his conduct because he didn't want to be observed behaving in a way that might lead people to be concerned or suspicious or later to place him at the scene. The fact that he made decisions to check out the hallway before finally exiting made a second decision actually in that process to get back into the classroom and put the hood up over his face and to walk out with his head down so that it would be more difficult to identify him. Suggested to me also an appreciation of wrongfulness, but also the fact that he was making calculated decisions for a rational purpose in a continuing course of conduct.
If we could play the next video. And then the next video. And the next. And the next. Doctor, the series of videos that just played of Colleen Ritzer crossing the landing, the defendant crossing the landing, and then each of them entering the bathroom, was that series of videos significant to you in forming your opinion regarding Mr. Chism's criminal responsibility?
Yes, it was.
Could you explain that, please?
First, he continued to obscure his identity by keeping the hood pulled up over his head as he was walking forward. He also appears to be carrying a pair of gloves and pausing briefly to put them on prior to entering the bathroom. The obscuring of his identity suggests that he still appreciates the wrongfulness of his conduct, or at least that others would appreciate it was wrong, and so hiding his identity. The procuring of the gloves, I think, permits an inference that as he was following her, he had prepared himself in advance with gloves, and potentially an inference that he was doing so both to perhaps minimize the amount of blood that he might get on his hands in an attack, or, and these are not mutually exclusive, or to prevent fingerprints of his later to be retrievable from the bathroom where the attack would occur.
And how are those two inferences relevant to the second two prongs of whether he understood the wrongfulness of his conduct and can conform his behavior?
The obscuring of his identity and the placing of the gloves, if intended to keep his fingerprints from being detectable at the scene of the attack, would suggest that he was aware of the wrongfulness or criminality of his act. The fact that he had acquired gloves and put them on prior to the attack suggests a degree of forethought which requires planning, and if that is the correct inference, would suggest rational decision-making in the course of a continued course of conduct.
If we could move to the next two videos. To the next three. I apologize, Mr. Langston. Dr. Kinscherf, you viewed those next three videos, and did they, in concert with the account of Ms. Bedard, impact your opinion in this particular case?
Yes.
And how so?
Ms. Bedard reported that she had entered the bathroom in order to make a cell phone call due to the acoustics in the hall, and that as she entered, she had seen the naked buttocks of an individual in the bathroom. She, as a result of seeing that, had immediately turned around and gone out of the bathroom.
And then, based on the videos of the timing at which the defendant then exits the bathroom, was that significant to you in any way?
It was. My recollection is that at this point, the defendant and Ms. Ritzer had been in the bathroom for about 6 minutes. Her entry into the bathroom and his prompt departure suggests to me that he may well have been concerned about detection, that she may have seen something, may have gone to get people, particularly if he was partially nude when she observed him. And his prompt departure would be consistent, depending upon what he does next here, with a continued course of action. Leaving the scene where he may have been identified by a witness is consistent with appreciating the wrongfulness of his act, or that others would see it was wrong. And leaving would also be a rational continuation of a course of conduct if you did not want to get caught.
If we could play the next series of videos. And the next. Now, Dr. Kinscherf, did that series of videos combined with your knowledge of the account of Carolyn Quigley's observations of Mr. Chism in that area just adjacent to the school, did those impact at all your opinion regarding his criminal responsibility?
Yes, they did.
How so?
I noted that he was leaving the scene where the attack occurred. He continued to have both his hood up and his face down and away from the cameras. He was carrying something in his hands. As he entered the bathroom with the two gloves, it wasn't clear to me that he was carrying anything at all, but now as he exits, he's carrying something out of the bathroom with him. If those were either his articles of clothing or those of Ms. Ritzer, it would be reasonable to infer that he was trying to take them from the scene to avoid identification or detection.
And to the best of your knowledge, does he then continue to have those in his hands after he is seen by Ms. Quigley in the shrub area adjacent to the school?
The best of my recollection is that after being in the shrub area as identified by Ms. Quigley, he's no longer carrying those items.
And if he concealed any of the items he was carrying in that shrub area, would that impact your opinion regarding his criminal responsibility?
Yes.
How so?
It would suggest that he's trying to obscure his involvement in this activity by both removing items from the scene and also getting rid of them before he would be seen carrying them around for a considerable period of time, perhaps seen by other people.
And how do those inferences impact your opinion, specifically regarding his ability to conform his conduct to the requirements of the law?
He is showing a decision that is in furtherance of his course of conduct here to evade detection and to obscure evidence of the crime and his involvement.
Now, Doctor, you are aware both from video and the account of an encounter that Mr. Chism has soon hereafter with Ramsey S. Garcia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was there anything significant to you regarding the interaction he had with Ramsey S. Garcia?
Yes. Ramsey came upon the defendant. He was looking for him because he was tardy for soccer practice. Ramsey describes Mr. Chism as looking frightened, swearing, sweating, looking concerned. Ramsey asked him what he was doing. He said that he had lost something. Ramsey offered to help him look for it. The defendant said no. He again offered to assist the defendant in looking for whatever it was that he had lost. The defendant again said no and directed Ramsey to return to the soccer field and that he would join him there later.
And how is that exchange significant to you in forming your opinion?
I think it supports an inference that Mr. Chism appreciated the wrongfulness of his act, or at least that Ramsey was likely to consider it to be wrong or criminal. He was intentionally misleading a friend in order to draw him away from joining Mr. Chism. He did so twice, and he then directed his friend to go to a place that would be not proximate to his continued course of action. This, I think, permits the inference of an appreciation of wrongfulness, but also that he is making decisions in a continued course of conduct, which are understandable.
And Dr. Kinscherf, while we're talking about Ramsey S. Garcia, did you also have an opportunity to take into account the accounts of Autumn Ciani, who was in the classroom just before Mr. Chism followed Ms. Ritzer into the bathroom?
Yes, I did.
And was her account of her observations of the defendant significant to you in any way?
Yes.
How so?
On two counts. One, she described an interaction between Ms. Ritzer and Mr. Chism in which Mr. Chism appeared to have become annoyed with her, but that the incident appeared to sort of have de-escalated as she changed the topic to other matters, and that while Ms. Ritzer was briefly out of the room, she had interacted at the whiteboard with the defendant, and he didn't seem to be particularly out of normal, if you will. He was not visibly distressed or upset or emotionally dysregulated.
And returning to the video, if we could play the next couple of clips. We could play one more. I lied, two more. The series of clips you just watched, and certainly you had seen before, Dr. Kinscherf, of Mr. Chism bringing the recycling barrel into the bathroom and then leaving the bathroom in the school with the recycling barrel, was that series of clips significant to you in forming your opinion regarding Mr. Chism's criminal responsibility?
Yes.
How so?
At the beginning of the sequence, Mr. Chism has changed out of the hooded sweatshirt and is now back into the red sweatshirt that does not have a hood. If during the course of the initial attack on Ms. Ritzer, he had injured her in a way that had led her to bleed, it would support an inference that he changed out sweatshirts, at least in part, to not be walking around with a sweatshirt with visible blood on it. I also noted that in part of the hallway, he was walking with his face mask up. I understand that this is an area of the school which is pretty empty at that time of day, but I think him pulling the barrel with a face mask up permits an inference that had he come across somebody unexpectedly, he would have wanted to have his identity obscured with the mask. Apparently, he continues to go into the bathroom, comes out with the barrel, seems to be physically managing the barrel at least a little bit. Comes out of the building. As he comes out of the building, he has lowered the balaclava, the face mask. That would permit an inference that he appreciated that if he were to be seen wandering away from the scene of a crime with a face mask, that might draw the concern or suspicions of individuals, and that a student pulling a barrel would probably be less noticeable to potential witnesses than one pulling a barrel out of a building with a face mask on.
And those inferences and observations together, how do they affect specifically the issue of him understanding the wrongfulness of his conduct and being able to conform his conduct to the law?
If he was, in fact, removing the body, if that is determined to be a matter of fact, then he is engaging in a course of conduct to take the body from the scene. The manner in which he does it is done in a manner to sort of lower his risks of being identified in doing so, both in obscuring his identity when he might come across somebody unexpectedly, but also by removing the face mask from his face when he's out in an environment where the face mask itself would have drawn concern or suspicion. If the barrel was also used to transport any of her belongings or his from the scene, it would be further evidence of both appreciation of wrongfulness, because he would not want to have been identified, but also a continuing course of action in the commission of the crime, which is rational in its purposes.
Now, Doctor, you're familiar with the account of Emily Roach, who ultimately sees the defendant with the barrel up sort of behind the field house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was his account significant to you at all?
Emily Roach's account?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, hers. Sorry.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I was understanding correctly. Yes, she noticed the defendant as he tried to maneuver the barrel up the hill with some considerable difficulty. She, at the time, did not give it a great deal of thought. She thought that he was perhaps one of the members of the maintenance crew taking a recycling barrel out into the wooded area. She noted him struggling with the barrel as he was trying to go up an incline and eventually bringing the barrel back down and moving in another direction. From that, I inferred that there was a reasonable probability that her body and perhaps his or her belongings were in the barrel, accounting for the weight as he tried to get it up the hill.
Now, Dr. Kinscherf, you are familiar with the condition of Ms. Ritzer's body when she was located in the woods. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is there anything about, and you're also familiar with the location of various pieces of clothing and the defendant's backpack in the woods, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you have an opportunity to view those woods and the locations where certain items were found yourself personally?
I did.
In total, those items I've just listed, did the condition of Ms. Ritzer's body as well as the setting in the woods and where things were located, was that significant in forming your ultimate opinion in this case?
Yes, it was.
And how so?
In a couple of ways. First, the condition of her body suggested or indicated that she had been subject to what is referred to as overkill. Overkill is inflicting damage onto a victim that would be beyond what is necessary to render them incapable of defending themselves, such as unconsciousness or death. It is also associated with very, very high emotional arousal, especially if it is targeting the face or other significant part of the body, face, neck area, breast areas. Hers were limited largely to the neck area, as I understand it. The stick that was found with her body, and the indications that there was blood at the tip of the stick suggested a vaginal insertion. This is a very low rate behavior in sexual assaults. It typically indicates the desire of the assailant to feel as though they have humiliated the victim and demonstrated their power over them. It also suggests that the attack in the bathroom was continued as a course of action once her body was out in the woods. It is not clear to me, based on the information that I have, whether she was dead or alive at the time that she...
Motion to strike.
The objection sustained. The motion to strike is granted.
Doctor, does it impact your conclusion in this case, whether she was dead or alive?
The fact that there were few...
Objection, non-responsive.
I think it's going to be, but just in case, why don't you answer that last question, yes or no?
Does the distinction of whether she was dead or alive, yes or no, impact your conclusion in this case?
Yes.
How so?
It impacts my conclusion because if she were dead at the time of the attack, then this sexual assault with the foreign object would have occurred post-mortem, which is an extremely low base rate event and suggests an intense emotional state focused upon a sense of complete domination and control over a victim and their humiliation. If she was alive at the time that she was taken, it means that he made a concerted decision, although aware that she was still alive, to continue a fatal attack.
And doctor, does anything about the condition of Ms. Ritzer when she's found or the scene in the woods undermine your conclusion that he was not suffering from a mental disease or defect on October 22nd?
No. In fact, the positioning of the body and some of the other events would suggest otherwise, actually.
How so?
In sexual homicides, it is not uncommon for the perpetrator then to sexually pose and position the victim. Unconscious or dead bodies are difficult to maneuver. They're heavy. And in this particular case, my view of the crime scene photograph suggests that she had been sexually positioned in this kind of pose, and that part of that was the sort of framing around some fallen fencing, it appeared to be, and then the positioning of the stick at her vaginal area.
And is that, the layperson would think that's a crazy thing to do. In your training and experience, in your opinion as a clinical psychologist, or a forensic psychologist, is that a crazy thing to do?
Posing the body is something that is done in sexual homicides by persons who do not have a mental illness.
And in fact, is it conduct you would expect from someone who's experiencing disorganization in thought?
Objection.
As to that question, I'll overrule the objection.
It does not... It is possible to have some degree of disorganization and still sexually pose a body. However, the posing of the body with then at least some effort to hide it with leaves and sticks and dirt, and the distribution of objects at some distance away from where the body was and some effort to hide them would suggest that time was taken to do this. There was at least some degree of thought to do this. In and of itself, it would not suggest to me that this would be an indicator of psychosis, for example.
If we could return.
Can I say, Counsel?
could return to video 47, Doctor, in the next couple. We could play one more. Doctor, the series of videos that just played, were they significant to you in forming your opinion regarding the defendant's criminal responsibility in this case?
Yes.
How so?
The defendant is seen on the earlier clips of the videotape returning back into the building. As he walks across the parking lot, is walking in a fairly leisurely but purposeful manner. He picks up speed a little bit as he goes into the building, but is not making a mad dash through the building. He walks in a purposeful manner, retrieves something from his locker. I can't tell what it is precisely he's retrieving because the door obscures it, but he then enters a bathroom that's nearby, changes his clothes. To the extent to which he may have had debris or blood on the clothing following the attack in the woods. Changing his clothing would be both an indicator that he was aware that if he was seen particularly with blood and so forth on his shoes or on his pants, he might be an object of suspicion or concern, and also suggests sort of deliberate furtherance of a course of action by going and changing his clothes in order to hide his involvement and to, and I'll just stop there, in order to hide his involvement.
And Doctor, you're familiar with the video that follows this where the defendant ultimately returns to the woods for a period of time and ultimately the jeans and t-shirt are recovered from the woods, is that correct?
Correct.
And then are you familiar both with video and the account of a Kevin Hebert who the defendant spoke to once he emerged from the woods again?
Yes.
And was there anything, starting with the apparent discarding of the jeans and the t-shirt in the woods, was that significant to you in forming your opinion?
It was.
How so?
It was because he, by taking his clothing out of the school, is removing from the scene of the attack or the nearby bathroom clothing related to the attack, which may have had blood or debris or other evidence on it. The statement by Mr. Hebert, whom he encounters, was significant to me because Mr. Hebert, who is a student at this school and an acquaintance of Mr. Phillips from their church group, he described Mr. Chism as being absolutely unremarkable. He was normal. He looked normal. They had a brief conversation about going to a church-related event later that weekend. The conversation ended, and Mr. Chism went off. Mr. Hebert apparently thought nothing of this encounter until he was later asked to describe it to the police.
And Doctor, you're familiar that eventually, after making his way through the school, Mr. Chism ends up making some purchases with Ms. Ritzer's credit card in the area of Endicott Street.
Correct.
Is there anything significant about that his use of her credit card to go to a movie and go to Wendy's, that was significant to you?
Yes.
How so?
It was significant to me because it, I thought, supported an inference that while there was a considerable, that there was evidence for preparation and planfulness for the attack, that, as often happens in these kinds of homicides, careful planning for the post-attack phase was not good, was not complete. It is not possible for me, on the basis of information that I have, to know whether this was largely a function of failure to plan a post-attack departure from the scene, or whether it was, as sometimes happens as time goes by, a person who has fled a crime scene, as the minutes or hours go by, they become more confident that they have escape detection, or some combination of the both.
And as they become more confident they've escaped detection, do they get sloppy?
Sometimes they get sloppy. Sometimes it can reflect, quite frankly, a kind of either an ambivalence about the attack or a certain kind of grandiosity about their invincibility. And I can't distinguish between those in this particular case.
In addition to the purchases made, you've reviewed video from BJ's where the defendant apparently successfully shoplifted a knife. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that significant to you at all, particularly on the issues of whether he understood the wrongfulness of his conduct and could comport his behavior?
Yes. It was significant to me in that he engaged in a successful shoplift. He was not someone, for example, who was so disorganized or unthoughtful that he simply walked into a store while acutely mentally ill and started walking out with merchandise. He successfully engineered a shoplift. That permits the inference that he would have known that even stealing a knife from a BJ's would be considered wrong or a crime, at least by others. And he also managed to enter and exit the store without any overt signs that drew any particular attention to himself.
And how is that significant?
That was significant to me because if he were acutely psychotic and highly disorganized, the odds that he would be able to enter and exit a place where people were viewing him without being noticed in some way, or at least having that observable on videotape, is pretty small.
And Doctor, moving on, you are familiar with the accounts of Mr. Chism being located and taken into custody in Topsfield, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what, if any, significance did you have from those accounts in forming your ultimate opinion?
The Topsfield police described him as staring straight ahead, sort of with a flat emotional state, that he was, at least initially, sort of evasive and unresponsive to their questions, but ultimately he was responsive, gave his name, and so forth. They searched him because they were concerned that he might have been armed. They found some things belonging to Ms. Ritzer. amongst those possessions, and one that was a particular concern to me was what apparently turned out to be her underwear.
And why was that a particularly concern to you or particularly significant to you?
That was particularly significant to me because in sexual homicides, one of the things that perpetrators will not uncommonly do is to take what sometimes gets called in the literature a trophy or souvenir. It's intended to keep the memory of the victim and the assault with them over time. And Doctor, I want to return to the testing that you had Dr. Hebben do. With respect to the MMPIA, that testing did reveal certain symptoms of a mental illness, is that, if you put aside the malingering. Is that correct? That's correct.
Based on those symptoms reported in the MMPIA, how would you have expected the defendant to appear when you were meeting with him in that same time frame? I'm sorry, which time frame, Counselor? You were meeting with him
Yes.
during the same period of time when Dr. Hebben was testing him, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And based on the symptoms that were reported in the MMPIA, in the event that they weren't a result of malingering, what would you have expected to see when you were sitting down with Mr. Chism?
I would have expected to see someone that was pretty emotionally unstable and dysregulated, who might respond with verbal or physical aggression to frustration, who would be impulsive, behave in a reckless manner, and generally looked pretty behaviorally and emotionally disturbed. The number of symptoms that he reported would have suggested a pretty turbulent picture of behavior and emotion at that time.
And in fact, during the 13 hours you spent with Mr. Chism, did you ever see evidence of that kind of disease process?
No.
Doctor, based on your evaluation in this case and everything that you reviewed and the time you spent with Mr. Chism, did you form an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty as to whether Mr. Chism was experiencing auditory hallucinations when in your presence?
Yes.
What was that opinion?
I could not 100% rule out the possibility, but the probability would have been extremely low. If he was hearing them, they were not impacting upon his behavior or his decisions with me, as near as I could discern, and they were not compromising his ability to interact in a meaningful way with me.
Now, Doctor, you talked about that based on your review in particular of his family records, there were some diagnoses you wanted to rule in or rule out before reaching your final decision in this case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And specifically, I think you said, but correct me if I'm wrong, you wanted to rule out schizoaffective disorder.
That's correct.
Can you describe, let me ask you this, what's a differential diagnosis?
A differential diagnosis is when you try and decide which diagnosis is the best fit for the clinical picture that's in front of you.
And in fact, in this case, did you contemplate a number of different differential diagnoses?
I did.
And can you describe the process for the jury that you went through to rule in or rule out each of those possible diagnoses?
The first thing that I did was review all of the history available to me in Mr. Chism's history, family, school, peers, sports activities, other sorts of things, to try and get a sense of his functioning over time. I then took into consideration the self-reports of symptoms that he was giving to me, and I took into consideration testing and tried to sort of use this and other information to sort of put together what would be the most likely possible diagnoses. So amongst the ones that I considered, and I'll apologize in advance for using words that start a lot with schiz. That's largely an accident of history, as psychiatry was trying to sort out what all these different diagnoses were. But because of the intensity of what he was describing, although inconsistently over time, his auditory hallucinations and his sort of blunt emotional state with me. I considered the possibility of a brief reactive psychosis. I ruled that out because the symptom picture was not entirely consistent with a brief reactive psychosis, and when people do experience a brief reactive psychosis, they typically present as extremely emotionally turbulent and extremely confused, and Mr. Chism with me was neither one of those. It would also have been a relatively low base rate event because it's twice as often diagnosed in females, and the average age of onset is in the mid-30s, so he would have been unusual for that. But even if I had accepted the symptom picture as presented, he did not meet the other qualifiers for the diagnosis. I considered schizoid personality disorder. A personality disorder is a long-standard pattern of behaving associated with the person's personality features that creates difficulty in their interactions in the world and in their functioning. A schizoid personality disorder is one in which a person really is indifferent to human relatedness, human relationships. They're simply not interested in people. They prefer solitary activities. They're not particularly interested in intimate or sexual relationships with people. They don't really particularly care one way or the other how people judge them, either positively or negatively. Some people with schizoid personality disorder may go on to develop a psychotic disorder, but most do not. And Mr. Chism did not meet all of the criteria for a schizoid personality disorder. For example, people who have schizoid personality disorder really do prefer solitary activities. You would not typically see, for example, an adolescent with a schizoid personality using their time to go skateboarding with other people or playing on soccer teams. That just requires too much interpersonal interaction that they really don't want. Because of some of the content of his thoughts to me, reported to me, I considered schizotypal personality disorder. The schizotypal personality is similar to a schizoid personality in that they really are not particularly interested in human interaction with people. But that is driven more by both anxiety. They're more anxious around people. They don't know how to communicate with people particularly well. And it kind of matters to them whether or not people judge them favorably or disfavorably. The other reason that they don't interact well with people is that they commonly have eccentricities and oddities of thought. They may have very unusual interests or very sort of unusual belief systems that to which they adhere, and that they become so wrapped up in them that it's often difficult to have just sort of common conversation with them because they just want to talk to you about the things that they're interested in. Those things are pretty odd. If they find somebody else who is interested in the same thing, they can talk to each other forever about it, but they're not going to wander much into each other's personal lives because they really don't care about all that very much. He did not meet criteria for schizotypal personality disorder for a variety of reasons. One is that he does not have other symptoms associated with it, like ideas of reference. Ideas of reference are when you think that, for example, a blue car stopped at an intersection, and all of a sudden you know somehow that blue car means something for your life. Like, that blue car stopped, I better double down on the lottery today, right? So those are not uncommon that people have these sorts of things, but people with schizotypal personality disorders often have trouble because of the frequency with which they actually act on these ideas. They also express social anxiety, which I did not observe in Mr. Chism in his interactions with me. So
I'm just going to direct you a little bit, Doctor. Sure. Doctor, with respect to the psychotic disorders, did you have a differential diagnosis regarding the psychotic disorders?
Yes. I looked specifically at schizophrenia, and because of the family history and the reports of mood symptoms, schizoaffective disorder, he did not meet the threshold criteria, in my view, for either of those disorders.
And what about mood disorders? Did you examine those?
I did examine those. I thought that there was some evidence, but primarily based upon subjective self-report of a possible mood disorder of a mild to moderate nature.
And was your assessment of a subjective self-report colored at all by the results of Dr. Heben's testing and your own observations?
By the time I had started to consider the possibility of a mood component, I had not received the testing results back yet, so I couldn't have been colored by them at that time. And by the time I received them, I had already formed an opinion that seemed to be consistent with her testing, but it didn't really shape my differential diagnosis of a mood disorder.
Now, Doctor, it's fair to say one of the other areas you considered were dissociative disorders. Is that correct?
That's true.
To that end, did you do any particular testing yourself?
I did.
Specifically, did you administer a DES for adolescents?
Yes, the dissociative experiences scale for adolescents.
And can you explain to the jury what that test is?
Yes. Dissociative disorders are disorders in which the person experiences disturbances of ongoing identity, memory, and their continuity of consciousness, if you will, identity, memory, and sort of ongoing sense of them being themselves. Dissociative experiences are not all that uncommon in ordinary people. Many of us had the experience of really thinking about something and driving down the highway, and then all of a sudden realizing, you've hit your exit. And if I were to ask you, what did you drive by? How many pickup trucks were there? How many, big cargo trucks were you would have no idea. But you somehow managed to, without being focused consciously on the road, to steer your car down the road without crashing. Right? So that's kind of a relatively common dissociation of your actual behavior from your ongoing memory tracking, pretty common. At the extreme of dissociative disorder is what used to be called multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, so is what it's called now. And these are individuals who experience themselves in sharply discrete fragments that are referred to as alters. They typically experience amnesias. The so-called host personality will experience amnesias or distortions for what has occurred while the individual has been replaced, if you will, by the alter. Alters can have their own sets of beliefs, their own preferences in behavior, their own preferences of gender, clothing, and in extreme cases. And there can be many, many alters.
And the test that you did, what is that test designed to elicit?
The test is a screen for dissociative experiences. It asks the person who is taking the measure to look at roughly 30, 28, or 30 items and answer the question, how frequently do you experience these? And it goes from 1 to 10. And presumably you can leave it blank, in which case it would be scored a 0. But so somebody endorsing a particular item at 10 is essentially telling the evaluator that I experience this dissociative symptom 100% of the time. And you're allowed to sort of calibrate.
And what were the results of Mr. Chism's, or were there any difficulties with the results of Mr. Chism's testing on the DES for adolescents?
The score that Mr. Chism yielded on the dissociative experiences scales for adolescents was roughly double of what the score is for adolescents who have been confidently diagnosed with a dissociative identity disorder.
Why doesn't that mean that he's off the charts for having a personality disorder? For having a dissociative disorder, I apologize.
Because a person who would be experiencing that intensity and frequency of symptoms over that much of the course of their day would look extremely confused, dysregulated. They often, when they're in that state, look frightened. So, for example, people who have the dissociative symptom of often finding themselves in places where they have no idea how they got there or who they're with. This is anxiety-provoking for people. And so over the course of 13 hours, I looked for these kinds of shifts in emotion, in affect state. I didn't see shifts in behavior. I didn't see shifts in emotional state that you would see at that extreme. I did not see amongst his belongings, for example, discontinuities and things like handwriting. People who have dissociative identity disorder, different alters will have different handwriting, or a wildly varying set of interests that shifted rapidly over the course of his life and adolescence. I did observe some potential anomalies of memory or difficulties with memory, but I thought they were better accounted for by other hypotheses.
And doctor, did you ultimately, based on the DES and other observations, rule out a dissociative disorder?
Yes, although I didn't rely heavily on the DES findings to rule it out, because any tool is best used when you can confirm it by outside observation of how the person is actually behaving or how their functioning is impacted. And so my ruling out of a dissociative disorder was largely because I could not find in his history the kinds of histories of severe and chronic maltreatment that are associated with the development of dissociative disorder. Could not find evidence of a neurologically driven dissociative state, and I did not observe either in his history nor in his time with me the kinds of presentations that would support dissociative disorder diagnosis.
Doctor, when you were evaluating Mr. Chism, he was 16 years old, is that correct?
That's correct.
And at the time of this offense, he was 14 years old, is that correct?
That's correct.
How did that age and development factor at all into your ultimate conclusions in this case? And what did you take into account?
I took into account his course of development up till age 14, and then the circumstances of his life following October 2013, when he was largely he was entirely in facilities-based care, which has a developmental impact on young people. I took into account his opportunities for physical and cognitive and emotional maturation between 14 and 16. This is one of the reasons when you have sort of an adolescent who's a moving target anyway, if you're trying to get back to what this person looked like at a specific time, you want to rely as much as possible on observations, testing, and so forth that are in that time period. Adolescents can be moving targets developmentally.
Now, doctor, based on all of the evaluation you did and everything you reviewed, believe you've already testified to this, but you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty as to the issue of criminal responsibility on October 22nd.
I did.
And what was that opinion?
My opinion is that at the time of the offense, that Mr. Chism was not suffering from the requisite mental disease or defect, although he may have exhibited some symptoms of psychological distress or disturbance, but that in any event, whatever he may have been experiencing in that time was not sufficient to substantially impair his capacities to appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of the attack on Colleen Ritzer, nor to have conformed his conduct to the requirements of law.
They did not impact his ability to conform his conduct.
That's correct.
I have nothing further for Dr. Kinscherf.
Thank you, Counsel.
Good afternoon, Dr. Kinscherf.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
Now, whenever you evaluate a juvenile, you consider adolescent brain development, correct?
That's correct.
And how is your consideration of adolescent brain development based in the scientific research that's been done on the brain?
Yes.
And what is well accepted about the differences between do adolescent brains differ significantly from adult brains?
On average, yes.
And so the questions I'm going to be asking you about what is known about adolescent brains generally, not about Philip Chism's brain, okay?
Understood.
All right. So what is the physical process that distinguishes an adolescent's brain from an adult brain?
At the onset of puberty, the brain begins quite dramatic restructuring as the hormones that influence the adolescent's body also work on the nervous system. And so what you see is essentially a reorganization of the adolescent's brain, largely between the ages of about, well, whenever the onset of puberty is for a child, and the early 20s, although at least in males it goes into the mid-20s. Amongst the things that we see is a reorganization of the relationship between the midbrain, which is the center of the brain which is responsible for threat assessment, emotion, fear, sort of basic appetites and drives and the like, and the frontal lobe. There is a period of time in which the midbrain has developed and the frontal lobes will still be relatively undeveloped. One person once put it to me, if you want to sort of understand adolescence, one model of thinking about it on average, and there's a huge range in adolescence, of course, is kind of like putting the brakes of a small car on a mid-size or large family car. You're going to have inefficiencies as a result of that are reflected in things like a greater proclivity towards impulsivity and the like.
So juveniles tend to be, the brain development issues is linked to juveniles being more impulsive, correct?
On average, yes.
And more likely to take risks?
Yes.
And more likely to perceive threats?
More likely to?
Perceive threats?
No, that's true if the adolescents have also had a significant trauma history. Adolescents with that kind of history are more likely to perceive threats than even other adolescents, actually.
And one of the differences between say a 14-year-old and a 25-year-old is making considered judgments and reflecting on options and plausible consequences, correct?
It depends upon the context in which the decision is being made. By mid-adolescence, most adolescents, although certainly not all of them, are able to make decisions that are relatively similar to those of adults in what are called conditions of cool decision-making. Cool decision-making is what occurs when somebody sits down and thinks about it. Adolescents are actually pretty good if they have the involvement in their decision-making of a concerned adult, for example, or somebody who can help kind of slow them down while they reason themselves to a conclusion. They are worse than adults on average, and again, there's a huge range here, when they're asked to make decisions under so-called hot cognition decisions. Hot cognition decisions are times in which they are distressed, emotionally aroused, and feel as though they need to respond relatively immediately to something in their environment.
I just need a minute.
Sure.
Now, this research is based on brain scans that are done of studies that are done via brain scans, correct?
It's done both with brain scans, but also decision-making behavioral research conducted largely by psychologists.
And the brain scans are MRIs, correct? And also CAT scans and other types of scans.
Yes, although I'll have to acknowledge that the scan technology is not in my technical bailiwick. But yes, those are the kinds of things that they use.
And research has also found that that there are changes in the volume of different areas of the brain in people suffering from schizophrenia, correct?
You can. I'll sit down.
Are you familiar with the DSM-5?
I'm familiar with it, yes.
And is it something that you use regularly?
When making diagnosis, yes.
And it's an established source of information for psychologists and psychiatrists, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, the DSM-5 states that reduced overall brain volume has been observed, and as well as increased brain volume reductions with age in schizophrenics, correct?
That's true, but the DSM also cautions that a diagnosis of schizophrenia cannot be made on the basis of laboratory testing given the existing state of the science.
Correct, but brain volume reductions are associated with schizophrenia, correct?
It's a little more complicated than that. Brain volume reductions are associated with schizophrenia. They're associated with normal aging. They're associated with a lot of different conditions. So that's true as far as it goes, but it's not pathognomic or specific to schizophrenia.
Now, you did not order any brain scans of Philip Chism, correct?
That's correct.
And if you did order brain scans and the brain scans showed significant reduction in volume in certain areas of the brain, that would be something you would consider, correct?
I would refer, yes, I would consider it. I would refer to neurology to see if there was any impact on actual functioning.
And you did not request a brain scan, correct?
It's not clear to me that I would be able to. I'm not a physician. I'm a psychologist, but I did not, to be fair to your point, I did not seek one.
If I could have a moment.
Sure.
It's fair to say, Dr. Kinscherf, that diagnosis of mental illness in childhood and adolescence is tricky under the best circumstances, correct?
I would agree with that.
And teenagers are constantly in the process of developing, correct?
I would agree with that.
And they are a moving target for professionals attempting to diagnose them, correct?
That's true.
I have nothing further.
Sure.
One question. Doctor, everything you've testified to regarding the juvenile brain development, did you have all of that in mind when reaching your opinions in this case regarding Philip Chism?
Absolutely.
I have nothing.
I have nothing.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. McDougall?
Pending a stipulation which Ms. Regan is signing, which was actually already read to the jury at my case in chief, the Commonwealth rests again.
Okay. All right, thank you. Could I see counsel at the sidebar, please? Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do to use your time well, and rather than have you spend a lot of time sitting around tomorrow, is just have you come in Friday for closing arguments, for if there's other evidence, closing arguments, and charge. I would say that you'd be a deliberating jury. Without promising you anything, on Friday, I'm going to estimate 12:30, but I feel like it will be before lunch, that you'll have the case and be deliberating on Friday. Don't come here tomorrow. Please don't go to work tomorrow. This is considered a jury day for all the reasons that you understand it being a jury day, but don't go to work. You want to stay away from anyone who might want to try and talk to you about the case. Don't come tomorrow. Friday morning, we'll bring you into court at 9 o'clock, and I hope, but do not, you'll get the case Friday. I hope, but do not promise that it's going to be before lunch. Don't discuss the case among yourselves or with anybody else. Don't do any independent investigation concerning this case. Avoid any information from any source, either one in the courtroom, and the jurors are excused until Friday at 9 o'clock, not tomorrow.
All rise. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons having anything further to do before the Honorable David Lowy, Justice of the Superior Court, now sitting at Salem within and for this county of Essex at present, depart and give your attendance at this place Friday morning next at 9 a.m. to its time and place. The sitting of this court is now adjourned.